Welcome to Buffalo Pregame, your source for live Buffalo football discussion, news, analysis, opinions, and more. Presented by ASM Publications and Bills Digest.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Buffalo Pregame. I'm your host, Alex Brasky, here for ASM Publications and what is now Shout Magazine. We've gone back to our roots as Bills Digest started as Shout Magazine way back in the day, and the owners of the magazine have decided to try to regain some of that Super Bowl mojo, taking a step back into yesteryear, and like I said, trying to reignite some of that Super Bowl feeling that the Bills had in the early 1990s. But once again, I'm your host, Alex Brasky, here on tonight's show, and we dive into the injury report on both sides. Will Matt Milano play? What about Taron Johnson? Is there an update on Ed Oliver? Also, we take a look at the Jets' injuries. And finally, Visor Josh Allen is in full effect. Each week on Buffalo Pregame, I'll provide updates on the NFL, NHL, and more via daily articles, podcasts, videos, and more. Please subscribe to Buffalo Pregame with Alex Brasky on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts, along with Buffalo Pregame with Alex Brasky on Substack. And what I've been doing on Substack ever since I really have gone full steam ahead with Buffalo Bills on SI, I've been providing my pregame 5 takes, my postgame 7 takeaways. So really what is sort of an in-depth look at each Bills matchup before and after the game. So I encourage you all to subscribe there, and also head on over to YouTube and lay a comment and hit that like button if you're watching on YouTube right now. Also subscribe to the channel. It would really mean a lot to me. But all right, let's get into it. Bills come into this game at 2-0. The Miami Dolphins at 0-2. And it's been chaos in Miami. Really nothing going right for this team. Rumors of Tyreek Hill set to be traded. Some interesting comments coming from Tua Tagovailoa, really with each passing week. And he struggled mightily through the first 2 weeks of the season. Fans are calling for the heads of general manager Chris Greer and head coach Mike McDaniel. It really could not get any worse in Miami for the Dolphins. And really, I think that's just how Bills fans like it. Buffalo has really dominated this matchup over the years since Sean McDermott took over at the helm. And it wasn't all that long ago where the Bills couldn't beat Miami, whether it be at home or on the road. And now to take care of them, no matter the setting of the game, it's really, I think, special to many old-time Bills fans that, like I said, watch this rivalry go one way the other way for quite some time. So Buffalo enters this game a massive 11.5-point favorite as of Tuesday. They opened as a 12.5-point favorite, but it's taken a step back by a point. Same thing happened going in to the Bills' Week 1 matchup against the Baltimore Ravens. So I wouldn't put too much stock into that. There's always some question as to what causes a line to go up or down, whether it be injuries, whether it be where the money's going on either side. And you can have your own opinion on that. But like I said, I don't think it's really anything to get too worked up about. I think many are expecting the Bills to dominate this game from pillar to post. And when you ask me, I just don't see any way around it. The Bills have a few injuries, but their offense is clicked on both sides, whether it be the passing game or the running game through the first 2 weeks of the season. Both elements of that offense showing some bright spots. And Josh Allen coming in with the banged up nose, a little bit of raccoon eyes today during his time at the podium speaking to the Bills media. But his historic fourth quarter against the Ravens, and then James Cook rolling to a monstrous day on the ground against the New York Jets, just really puts this offense in such a good spot going into this game. It's hard to believe that the Dolphins, who really haven't been able to stop a nosebleed through the course of their first 2 games, they've allowed 66 points over the course of the first 2 weeks. And if you look at the Bills' defense, the way they responded this past week against the New York Jets, Joey Bosa really leading the way. You had Ed Oliver really taking the reins and guiding this defensive line through the course of that Week 1 matchup against the Ravens. And in Week 2, it was indeed Joey Bosa getting the work done. And just incredible numbers from him in terms of his pass rush ability. And he spoke about his comfortability in Buffalo and how he's just so excited to play with his team, and not only what he's experienced in the locker room, but schematically, he's getting back to that 4-3 front, something that allows him to put his hand in the ground and get a little bit more involved in the running game as well. And he's really enjoying that transition back to what he played in college. He said at the podium, he's really getting back to his roots, and you're seeing the fruits of that transition, or that transition bear fruit, I should say, for the Bills, as Joey Bosa has been incredible through the first 2 weeks of the season and really taking a monstrous step during that New York Jets matchup where he came away with a sack, 2 fumbles forced. He's now up to 3 on the season. No other player in the league has more than 1 forced fumble. So with Joey Bosa going full steam ahead, we'll talk about him a little bit more later. Everything really going right for the Bills, like I said, on both sides of the ball, and everything going wrong for the Miami Dolphins. So it is a divisional game. We'll see how this one plays out, but the Dolphins haven't won in Orchard Park since Sean McDermott took over as head coach, and I don't see that changing this week or anytime soon for that matter. And like I said, it's kind of polar opposites here entering this game, and the Bills with that week 1 scare against the Ravens, and then if you look at their upcoming schedule, they don't have another really challenging matchup until that week 9 contest against the Kansas City Chiefs. This is really when you start to get rolling. You start to figure some things out. And like I'm going to mention later, maybe scale back a few key players' contributions in the second half of games, which will allow you to kind of maintain their health as the season goes along. But let's get into the injury report on both sides. Plenty to discuss following the Bills' second practice day of a short week. And defensive tackle Ed Oliver and Matt Milano did not practice once again today. Oliver out with that ankle injury, and Milano out with the pectoral injury. No update on Oliver. He remains in a walking boot. I'd be surprised if we see him next week at this point, as like I said, no noticeable progress. We don't know what's going on behind the scenes, but as far as reports coming out of Orchard Park, Oliver remains in that walking boot. He's been seen inside the field house, seen inside the locker room. So I think the Bills are going to take things slowly with their former first-round pick. Milano, a little bit dubiousness, I should say, surrounding his status, as Sean McDermott said that he would leave the door open for Milano to practice on Wednesday, but did not rule out a long-term injury. So kind of giving mixed signals there. You don't really know what to expect with Milano. He's dealt with that pec injury before. He missed a couple of games, came back, had to go on IR, missed 3 more games, and a couple of his teammates, Terrell Bernard and Daquan Jones, have also dealt with similar injuries. It was a strain for Bernard. He missed 2 games, and it was a tear for Daquan Jones. He missed a total of 10 or 11 games. That courtesy banged up Bills, Dr. Kyle Trimble over there. So there's a little bit of variance when it comes to this injury with Matt Milano and what to expect. But as David Serrano says here, whether Milano can play or not, it would be nice for the Bills to get up on this team early and then be able to rest the starters as the game goes along. But we'll see with Milano as the Bills practice once again on Wednesday. And if he is out, there's really no concern with his replacement. This is one of the areas where at this point the Bills have a little bit of depth with Dorian Williams, and he could be a starter for many teams in this league. He led the Bills in tackles with, I believe, 117 last year when starting about 12 games for Buffalo during the 2024 campaign. So he's proven more than capable, and I think it may even benefit you to get Dorian Williams some extra reps. Maybe not this early in the season. You don't like to see Matt Milano go out this early, or at any point for that matter. But with Dorian Williams, I don't think there's much concern in terms of his ability to plug and play and provide somewhat of the same performance that you see from Milano on a weekly basis. The one thing with Milano, he's such a great veteran presence and can read opposing offenses so well. He's always seemingly a step ahead of those trying to come and block him, and also in coverage at times too. But Dorian Williams stepping in shouldn't be that big of a problem for the Buffalo Bills. And I think this defense should be in for a big day against the New York Jets, who have really struggled this season. The Miami Dolphins, who have struggled this season. And you saw the way that the Bills performed against the New York Jets this past week. Plugging in a player of Dorian Williams' caliber, like I said, I think it's going to be a smooth transition and something that the Bills really won't experience any sort of downside outside of the fact that Milano, an aging player who's been off injured over the past several years, dealing with another injury that's going to keep him out for a few weeks. But beyond Oliver and Milano, the only two players that did not practice for the Bills today, you had nickel cornerback Taron Johnson practicing for the second straight day. He was limited with a quad injury, and that's a good sign. And he said after practice to, I believe it was Matt Milano, that he's going to be good to go. But then again, he said that this past week, and we all know what happened come game day. So we'll continue to follow Taron Johnson's status, and it may come down to game day once again, and whether we see him out there early during workouts and what have you. So we'll have to pay attention to that as the next couple of days go here. But also limited at Tuesday's practice were linebacker Shaq Thompson with a hamstring/hand injury, defensive back Cam Lewis with a shoulder injury, and then defensive back Jordan Hancock limited as well with a shoulder injury. Hancock could make his season debut on Thursday against the Dolphins, and not sure what that would look like, probably special teams, but regardless, good to see the rookie getting back into the swing of things, dealt with that shoulder injury, but back limited 2 days in a row. So good sign for Jordan Hancock. And finally, on the injury front, Josh Allen's nose injury, not much of a concern. He has not been listed on the injury report. There are some lasting effects. He's got some bruising underneath both eyes and also the bridge of his nose. And he's also wearing a visor now in practice, which he says he'll wear during the game on Thursday. He has not worn a visor in the NFL previously, but he has experience wearing that visor in college. He commented on it after practice and said that it gets a little bit warmer inside the helmet there with the visor. And I'm sure there are some changes in vision, whether it gets dirty during the course of a game, maybe it fogs up. I obviously don't have any experience, but it'll be a new experience for Allen in the NFL. But like I said, something he has experience with dating back to his college years at the University of Wyoming. So Josh Allen and visor Josh Allen in full effect this Thursday against the Miami Dolphins. But let's flip over to the Dolphins side. Speedy wide receiver Jalen Waddle downgraded to limited with a shoulder injury on Tuesday. He practiced in full on Monday, but was limited on Tuesday. So his participation on Wednesday will be something to watch. And this is a budding, we all know about Waddle and Tyreek Hill, but this is really a budding Miami Dolphins skill position group. You have those two speedy wide receivers, but also Devon Achane has really had a strong start to the season. And Jalen Wright has been limited, I think, 2 straight days with his injury, trying to come back at the running back position. And Ollie Gordon is also another impressive player in the Dolphins arsenal. So Jalen Waddle missing this game would obviously allow the Bills to focus a little bit more on Tyreek Hill on the outside, but by no means is it really Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle and everybody else. They do have a little bit of depth in terms of their skill position players and players kind of waiting in the wings to step forward and strut their stuff. So we'll see if anybody gets increased opportunity with Jalen Waddle out this week. He, like I said, practiced in full on Monday, limited Tuesday. So Wednesday, we'll keep an eye on him. Elsewhere, starting cornerback Storm Duck has not practiced on either of the first 2 days of the practice week with an ankle injury. He missed this past week's game, and former Bills cornerback Roswell Douglas got the start. Duck was injured during the Dolphins matchup with the Colts in week 1 with an ankle injury, and really in the second quarter, I believe, so very early in that game, and they've been without him since then. And Miami secondary already projected to be atrocious. And now without Duck, I know that Bills fans still have some fondness for Rasul Douglas, but there was a reason why he was on the free agent pile for as long as he was. And then if you look beyond Duck's injury, starting safety, I'm going to butcher this name, Ifeatu Melifonwu will likely miss Thursday's game per Miami head coach Mike McDaniel. So Dolphins could be without not only Duck, but two starters in their defensive secondary. And like I said, this was already a group that was expected to be among the worst in the league this season. And I mentioned Jalen Wright's injury already. Also, starting offensive lineman Aaron Brewer has been limited all week, and I think his status a little bit in question for this coming week's game. So that's the injury report for both sides. Both teams come in a little bit banged up. I think the Bills' injuries are a little bit more considerable, it being a former All-Pro in Milano, who's really been at the forefront of your defensive effort these past 2 weeks, and also Ed Oliver, who was your best player in week 1 of the season. But we'll see if Milano is able to make a shocking start on Thursday. The Bills have really turned into the Patriots with these injuries. The way that Sean McDermott treats them throughout the week, deeming a few injuries this offseason as lower leg injuries, only to find out that they were actually groin injuries. I don't know who they think they're fooling, but they also waited this past week until the last minute with Tre'Davious White, and also in week 2 with Tre'Davious White. But it appeared in both circumstances that the outcome was pretty obvious that White was going to play in week 2 and was not going to play in week 1. So, as I said, Sean McDermott doing his best Bill Belichick impression. We'll see if Sal Capaccio can get anything out of him on the Extra Point Show come tomorrow morning. All right, let's take a quick break. And everybody watching, if you're watching on YouTube, which we have a few of you watching, if you're watching elsewhere, please head on over to YouTube. Click that like button, share, subscribe. We're trying to build the following on the YouTube channel. Started a new podcast this season, and it's been slowly but surely coming along, getting a few hundred views each episode on YouTube, a few thousand overall, and just trying to build things on the audio side as well. So if you listen to podcasts that way, subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. It would really mean a whole lot to me. All right, I already mentioned how the Dolphins haven't won in Buffalo since 2016, and Sean McDermott started that streak, but it's really been Josh Allen's performance that has carried it forward. And the first couple of seasons, obviously, it wasn't all Josh Allen, but over the course of his career, he's really been just incredible against Miami. And I'm telling you, a lot of you, that is something that you already know, but it's really remarkable, some of the stats that have come out of this matchup between Josh Allen and the Miami Dolphins. Allen, during the regular season, 12-2 in his career. He's completed 66.25% of his passes and thrown for 3,737 yards in those 14 games, an average of 266.9 yards passing per game. And he's been intercepted just 8 times while recording 37 touchdown passes in 14 games. Get your calculators out. I don't know how many touchdowns that is per game passing, but he's also added 5 rushing touchdowns and 46.2 yards per game on 7.27 yards per attempt. So it's been incredible to watch Allen just take over this rivalry. Well, what was once a rivalry, and just dominate it from the beginning of his career. And against this banged up Miami secondary, he should have no trouble moving the ball through the air. I know I said that a week ago, and that was my thing to watch. I wanted to see this passing game come alive for an entire game, but that was really not necessary. The Bills got going early and often on the ground, and James Cook had a monstrous day. So perhaps the beginning of this game is a little bit different. I know Miami's defensive line is really built to rush the passer. I haven't looked at the run stopping stats. I'll have to do that before tomorrow's preview episode, but I think this game is going to be a little bit different than the Jets game. Jets pressured Josh Allen. I don't know if the Dolphins are going to be able to do so as effectively in this one. So Miami does have several talented pass rushers. Jalen Phillips. They brought in Matthew Judon, Bradley Chubb. Kenneth Grant hasn't done much, the rookie that many Bills fans wanted Buffalo to draft at the defensive tackle position. But I believe Jordan Brooks has a sack this season as well. But there hasn't been much to speak of in the pass rushing department for Miami early on in the season. And Buffalo handles this team year after year, the continuity that they have up front along the offensive line. I'd be surprised if we saw anything different than an explosive performance from Josh Allen and this offense in this game. And as I mentioned before, this could be the final nail in the coffin for GM Chris Grier and Mike McDaniel. I think the Bills and their fans would really find plenty of satisfaction in that. Things have really spiraled out of control in Miami, calling for both of those men to be fired, our Dolphins fans. And even if it doesn't happen this week, I can see that GM head coaching duo really being fired in short order here. The Dolphins are just a complete dumpster fire, and the defense has been one of the worst in the league through the first 2 weeks of the season. They've allowed 33 points in back-to-back weeks against the Indianapolis Colts and the New England Patriots. Not necessarily high-powered offenses, or at least expected to be as much entering the 2025 season. So the secondary has been the biggest problem, but also, you look at the linebacker position, former linebacker for the Bills, Tyrell Dodson, has really struggled in his first 2 games this season. He's been under fire by the fan base. So the defense is in disarray. The Dolphins' offense was in disarray in week 1. It responded a bit in week 2, but there's even still questions on that side of the ball. And really the main question for the Dolphins' offense is that offensive line. They haven't invested enough into that position group over the years, and Tua was sacked 5 times this past week against the New England Patriots. And it's such a talented pass rush that the Patriots have. They brought in Milton Williams, one of the prized free agents of this entire offseason throughout the league. And Tua just has not been able to stay upright throughout the course of his career. And injuries have obviously been an issue with the concussions, and being sacked 8 times through 2 weeks. And with Joey Bosa matching up against the Dolphins this week, coming to town to meet that pass rushing beast. He's been one of the top pass rushers in the entire league this season. It'll be interesting to see how long Tua can remain upright this season, or really in this matchup. The offensive line just made up of complete nobodies, and the front office really has not done their quarterback any favors. You knew he was an injury-prone quarterback, somebody that you had to protect, and they've done really very little to do so. The roster construction overall on this team makes little to no sense, but I'll digress on that. Maybe we'll talk a little bit more about that on Wednesday's episode. The roster for the Dolphins includes Devon Achane, who I think is one of the up-and-coming players in the entire NFL. He's got great ability as a receiver. I think he had 8 receptions this past week against the New England Patriots, and maybe that doesn't spell great news for the Miami Dolphins going to your running back that often, but he's turned his opportunities into production, and you have to give him credit, and he's become really a big-time threat for this Miami Dolphins backfield. And Tyreek Hill also responded with a big game this past week. He went 6 receptions, 109 yards, including a 47-yard touchdown reception, which was his first of over 30 yards in quite some time. But now the injury to Jalen Waddle, if he's out, the Bills, like I said earlier, pay a little bit more attention to Hill. And I think the Bills have always had pretty solid success going up against Tyreek Hill. There have been some moments where you've seen him burn Buffalo down the field, but for the most part, I think they've always had a pretty good game plan going up against Hill, and I wouldn't expect anything different this week for Buffalo. Excuse me, a little tickle in my throat there, and I think a little water got caught in the stash there. We'll have to get a napkin after we get off here, but yeah, really not an offense that strikes fear in you. Tua, not a quarterback that strikes fear in you, and that's from his own words, as he said this afternoon that he can do not even half of what Josh Allen is able to do at the quarterback position. And Tua really saying the quiet part out loud in his comments today is Josh Allen. You look at what he's able to do: run through defenders, jump over defenders, as I said, run, pass, and really do it all. He's also had a receiving touchdown in recent seasons. Tua, much more limited of a player, and somebody who, if you work him off his first read, really starts to panic. And you've seen some questionable interceptions for him this season. And the Bills, if you're able to put pressure on him and make him get that ball out in awkward times, and like I said, if you're able to cover on the back end and get him off that first read when you're not able to apply that pressure, things become very difficult for him improvisationally, which he doesn't have much ability in that area of his game. But one area I could see the Bills being tested is it'll be interesting to see how Tre'Davious White bounces back from his first game action of the season, dealing with that groin injury, coming into the year, missing week 1, but getting the start against the Jets. And the Jets offense was just putrid in that game. And Justin Fields threw for 27 yards, which was fewer than the Bills had all game points-wise. So really an embarrassing day for Justin Fields. But Tre'Davious White fared pretty well in that game in the opportunities that he was given. I thought he looked really good in run support, coming up aggressively and being able to stop, who was it, Breece Hall in the backfield for a 5-yard loss. So White showing some positive signs in that game. But this is going to be a much more difficult matchup against the Miami Dolphins. Like I said, it's not an offense that strikes fear in you overall, but we mentioned it, or I did, on Monday's episode, that Tre'Davious White has had some of that athleticism and speed sapped over the years due to injury, and going up against very highly athletic and fast receivers in Jalen Waddle, potentially, and Tyreek Hill, and then Achane out of the backfield if he's ever potentially matched up with him. That'll be difficult for Tre'Davious White, and I'm interested to see how he's able to kind of take that next step in his comeback journey as a Bills starting cornerback. And then another note for the Bills defense, Joey Bosa. We all know he's been phenomenal through the first 2 weeks of the season, but if you're able to take a lead in this game, if you're the Bills, you got to get Joey Bosa out of there. You came into this season wanting to watch his snaps, and they've kind of gotten away from you in the first 2 weeks, particularly in week 1. I think he played 66% of the snaps. So this could be a great opportunity for the Bills to get Bosa out of the game and get him some much-needed rest, a much-needed respite. He entered halftime with a sizable lead last week, did the Bills, and I think you can do the same thing this week and maybe get Bosa out of the lineup a little bit earlier than you were able to against the Jets. With that said, Bosa did say today that he's feeling about as good as he ever has entering a Thursday game, so that bodes well for the Bills. And there's just no need to overexert him in this game. Get him out of there. Like I said, get him some rest and limit his snaps. And going forward into this kind of easy part of the schedule, I think you can take that approach in each and every game. Let him eat early and then get him out of there and put him in bubble wrap, as many Bills fans have said over the course of the first few weeks. But one more note on Bosa. He also commented how much he's enjoying playing for the Bills, and particularly playing in their 4-man front, which has allowed him to get back to his roots, he said, during college, early in his pro career, where he was playing with his hand in the dirt and being able to impact the running game, as I said earlier. And not only that, he really spoke glowingly about the Bills locker room and what that has meant to him early in his tenure here. And I think that can only help your production on the field as well. When you're happy off the field, I think you tend to perform a little bit better on the field. And this Bills locker room, as Rasul Douglas put it today, they have a system and everybody really follows it. And I think Bosa is really enjoying his time here in Buffalo. And like I said, get the good big guy some rest this week. He's certainly earned it with his performance early in the year. But all right, that's going to do it for tonight's show. A quick one, but we're back tomorrow with our game preview and prediction as well, which I imagine can probably get a little bit out of hand for some coming into this game. But we did cover a lot of this matchup tonight. I'll try to come up with some more to talk about tomorrow, but it's tough. This Dolphins team is just bad. It's really all there is to it. I should say, but no pun intended there. But all right, that's going to do it. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe, and I will see you next time.